It's time again for Talking Trade, sponsored by MMAC's World Trade Association and Michael Best Strategies.
Welcome back to Talking Trade. I'm Sandi Siegel, president of MEDAY. Today, it's a pleasure to introduce and have our guest today, Mike Heindselman. Mike is Senior Director of Global Logistics at Orbis Corporation, North America's largest sustainable packaging manufacturing. And here's where his work involves strategic logistics sourcing, supply chain technology, third-party fulfillment, as well as being the trade compliance officer. So quite a full plate at Orbis. Mike is also a fellow licensed customs broker and trade compliance professional. So I'm particularly excited to talk to him about that today, and has been the senior operations management leader with really quite a diverse experience in manufacturing verticals, including tier one automotive, food, pharma, and CPG companies. So again, Mike, really familiar with the importance of compliance programs, and I'm sure the many obstacles to implementing those programs. And so again, really excited to talk to you about that today. I also want to mention Mike's a member of the Wisconsin DEC. So again, really in touch with the community here in Wisconsin, and a lot of really valuable trade experience. So speaking of the trade community, you've got an upcoming presentation at the Madison Trade Association. And there, I understand you're going to talk about how to sell the C-suite on the importance of trade compliance. And I can certainly attest to how challenging that can be sometimes, and really how fundamental it is to launching any kind of trade compliance program, getting that buy-in from senior management. So tell us a little bit about your strategy, Mike, how you approach this, or how you coach others on how to approach senior management and get that buy-in.
Yeah, we'll do. And thank you, Sandi. Definitely appreciate you having me on Talking Trade today. Happy to participate, something new for me. So I look forward to the discussion. One thing I can say about trade compliance, and a lot of times I'm the odd man out, right, is I'm pretty bullish on compliance and opportunities within trade compliance. And people that may or may not hear this podcast or see it might remember me as I'm often reminded as I'm the guy at the UWEBC, which is University of Wisconsin Business Consortium trade compliance meeting, who was really excited about the Trump administration actions on Section 232 and 301. And generally, people around the room was like, look, I don't know what you're on, but I don't know why you would be excited about this. And my explanation when they got back around to me that day was, look, I'm not excited about what's going down particularly, but I'm excited because for the first time in our careers, leadership at multiple levels, right? The ELT, the C-suite, and the boardroom are actually having discussions, and they're focused on tariff and trade, and how those things have impact on the business overall. So for once, we had a voice, right? And I was the guy that said, at this point, you have the pulpit, you need to be able to exercise that voice. So in our discussion today, I do want to give a disclaimer, right, and say that what I'm talking about today, my opinion and my opinion only, from my professional expertise. Hopefully, people know that. These may or may not apply to your specific situation. I hope they do, but I'm not here to preach. I am going to evangelize a little bit. And, the disclaimer at the bottom is, past performance is no guarantee of future results in that regard. But when we talk about selling the C-suite, from my perspective, it's really about truly understanding your own organization and who those folks are that need to be supportive of your compliance journey or initiative or development. Maybe you already got a compliance program started and it needs to be enhanced, or you need to take it to another level. So to me, it's imperative that you have to communicate the value, true value in the company of trade compliance to the decision makers. And again, at different levels of the company, for that matter, because I'm a guy that thinks strength in numbers, right? I'm a person that says the more people you have speaking the same dialogue and the same language about a topic like this, and evangelizing, the more of those people, the better. It will help you It'll help you get people on the bus and understand the journey that you're taking. So, one thing I can say for sure is that, compliance, as well as a lot of other things, is about teamwork, right? There's no compliance without teamwork. This can't be one faction or one department or one functional area of a company that's leading the charge on that. It has to be multiple areas that understand the goal, how it impacts them, and why we're doing this. So no compliance without teamwork. And the important elements for success to me is, pretty simple. You have to have senior management buy-in, or it stalls. You can't drive it from the bottom up or the middle out. This has to be a top-down approach based on education. You got to have the right person leading the charge. So you need to have somebody that's got credibility within the organization. I've heard people call it the juice, right? You need somebody that's got juice in the business in order to be able to lead this initiative. Education is key. Multiple levels, right? You need to be able to educate, the people at the highest level of company, as well as folks in lower levels of the company to understand, why this is important to them. How do you communicate it? What are the lines of communication?
Sure.
We talk about 3 Ps: policy, procedures, and process. If you don't have that taken care of, right? If you don't have that shored up within the business, you'll likely fail in one regard or another. And frankly, it's not always just about enforcing regulations. A lot of times it's important to do the right thing as a business and as a community steward, right? So how do I see making compliance relevant to decision makers? I've already talked about education. I think you have to have the right level of education at the right touch points in the business. And I also think that, if people haven't heard of WIFM, what's in it for me, right? Everybody wants to know when you're going to talk about, hey, we're going to do this or these things, how does it impact me? What's in it for me? And that's where I think, the right person comes in with strategic influencing. You got to learn it. You need to know it, and you need to live the influencing piece of this. It'll be different things to different people. One thing I think everybody has in common is the bottom line. And, if you can express to those why it's important to the bottom line of the company, especially at the high levels, and quantify the risk, then I think that's a really big incentive, right?
That's the intention, absolutely. Well, it's all music to my ears, and I couldn't agree more with all your various points. And you've said it. I've seen it where often trade compliance is assigned to one person, and it's not a one-person job, without a doubt. And I think that's where a lot of companies can go wrong, again, without that buy-in and without the team effort. So I couldn't agree more with all of your points. Certainly, I've also seen it. I've been doing it a long time, and the comments you made on the 232 and the China tariffs is where we saw a lot of companies getting religion. All of a sudden, as you say, trade compliance got the attention it deserved because it had an impact on the bottom line, and so that certainly got the attention of a lot of senior management. I'm wondering what you're seeing or what your thoughts are, given what we've been through in the last 2 years. So, supply chain has certainly become the focus, and that became a household word in the last 2 years. And since the COVID and all the challenges in supply chain, that, really with a focus on delays and additional transportation cost and the challenges a lot of companies are facing now with inventory balances and rebalancing and trying to rework their supply chains and predict and forecast what lies ahead. Do you think there's been a shift away from the compliance side, and are we refocusing our priorities, and is trade compliance taking a backseat to that, or are you finding ways to be able to work that into the whole picture?
I can only, speaking from my perspective at Orbis, we're not a super high volume importer. We do a fair amount of exporting, pretty high volumes. But I can tell you that I don't think it really detracted our focus from the compliance side. But let's be clear, right? I think it's very organizationally dependent in that it's been chaotic over the last 3 years. We've all seen things that I think I anecdotally tell people all the time that I'm tired of saying the following words over the last 3 years. I've never seen anything like this in my career. And so because of that, I think it's very company dependent on how you approach those things. I do think that, it's probable that the chaos is preempted, companies' diligence in maintaining, a robust compliance program. No doubt about it, right? When it's feet to the fire and you need to produce or fulfill product, there are likely things on the dotting of I's and crossing of T's that don't get done as you would hope. So yeah, probably likely in that regard. I know, from our perspective, one challenge that we found was sourcing from different markets. I think there's a lot of people that were entrenched in certain markets that now had to learn the nuances or the ins and outs or the specifics of a different market where they're getting product overseas. And I think also, we can't ignore the labor and staffing challenges that nearly everyone, every company that I've talked to, anyone at every level in the business has encountered. So, ensuring that you've got competent folks and professionals, skilled professionals, filling those openings, butts in those seats, if you will, and not having those has probably compromised compliance in some ways. No doubt about it. I would say that I think companies need to be considering when you have those constraints and you have trouble fulfilling those roles, people need to be, it's 2023, right? We need to be looking at modern technology offerings that can certainly help companies fill some of the gaps, fill some of the constraints from just a resource perspective with volume and throughput, and help ensure compliance at the same time.
Yeah, well, I think you touched on it, probably because of all the moving parts in logistics, all the more reason in looking at other countries that you need that compliance program. And, as you look at different opportunities, and as well as dealing with some staffing issues, if without written procedures, it makes it really hard to onboard some of these new people. And I think that's part of what some of these companies are facing today, at least some of, the challenges that we're seeing.
Well,
Mike, yeah,
another point. That's a great point, though, Sandy.
Yeah.
I think if you truly do stand up a robust compliance program and you have that in place, new or tenured folks, it doesn't matter. It helps prevent them from drawing outside the lines, right?
Right.
So it helps shore up your compliance and prevent them from doing things that we knowingly shouldn't be doing.
Great. Mike, as we wrap it up today, any general comments you'd make on some of the biggest challenges today, either for Orbis or for others you're seeing, and trying to remain compliant in a really quickly changing regulatory environment?
Yeah, I had a former CEO that I worked with that would say the pace of change is never going to be slower than it is today, and I think we all recognize that. I can say that we already talked about a few of the challenges that I think will continue within the next year or two. Being staffing and different markets. I think the ongoing China geopolitical and economic issues are going to be really interesting, right? Because I think it's going to push more nearshoring. With more nearshoring becomes new markets, becomes new and problematic rules, regs that you might have to be dealing with. You might not have the subject matter expertise, the familiarity of that. I think intellectual property is going to continue to be on the forefront and be a focus with how we govern and regulate who we're doing business with. Consumptive demand. I'm an old guy, right? So I remember consumptive demand. Now it's called forced labor,
Right.
Section 307. I mean, let's be clear. That enforcement is coming. I think it's never more prevalent than it has been today. So I think that's scary. Russia and other countries that aren't playing nice, right? So when you're talking about exporting, now you've got sanctions that you may or may not have dealt with in the past. And I don't think they're going to get their act together anytime soon. So I think that's going to be a continued challenge. I think the EU carbon border tax initiative is really intriguing to me on how they roll that out, and if people are doing business into the EU, how that works with the WTO regs that exist. And believe it or not, I think I was reading something the other day. 2 years later, Brexit is starting to bubble up again. In England, in the EU, with regards to, most British manufacturers think this is just has been absolutely growth stifling, and they're ready to abandon it. So I don't think they were ever for it in the first place, but I think they're ready to abandon it.
Yeah.
And
Well, you made the case, without a doubt. And in our brief time, and all the more reason than ever, with all the big parts on the importance of the compliance programs and being ready to deal with all of the changes and navigate them. Mike, I want to be sure to mention some of the details, your upcoming event with the Madison Trade Association, their annual trade compliance program. I know we're always a big supporter of that and happy to participate. Numerous speakers. You're going to speak on trade compliance programs. The program is crossover, how, why, and the return on investment of trade compliance across the company. So that is Tuesday, February 14th. Still time for people to register. It is an in-person event, so it's great to get back at the Madison Trade Association and see people coming together. That's an all-day program, and I know it's usually been one of our best attended events. So looking forward to having you there. Again, Mike Heindselman, thank you for joining us. And I could talk offline for quite a while about trade compliance, but it was really great having you. So thank you for joining us on Talking Trade.
Thank you for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
You've been listening to Talking Trade, sponsored by MMAC's World Trade Association and Michael Best Strategies.